let's talk about how AI is being used for defensive operations, and then we'll go into offensive. But on the
Okay.
defensive side, because I always go defense first, and my students hate this because everybody wants to be a pen tester. But as I always tell them, there is one pen testing job for every 4 or 5 defense jobs. So if you
I
want
would
to break
agree.
into cybersecurity,
Yeah.
do defense first, right? And then you can work on the offense. So how can we use AI for defense? And is it going to be the end of our careers as cyber defenders and cybersecurity analysts? And
You know,
obviously, I don't think that's true, but
I
that's what
don't
everybody
think
thinks.
I don't think that's the case. Yeah, I was talking to somebody in the Netherlands who has insisted, as a couple weeks ago, insisted that all programming and cybersecurity analyst jobs are going to be ended in 2 years. And I'm like, will they be altered by it? Positively. I was talking to a friend of mine. His name is Chris Cochran. Chris Cochran. He used to work for Netflix as a threat hunter. He started out in the military, then worked for the NSA, then for Netflix. He's doing some cool stuff for Huntress Labs. And I talked with him about AI as a cyber threat analyst or as a cyber threat hunter is really what he does. But we're talking on the analytics blue team side, right? Fair
Yeah.
enough.
Yep,
And
definitely.
so what are your thoughts about it? He said AI will do things, does things, takes care of the repetitive, boring stuff so that I can focus on the fun stuff. Now that's
Yep.
a very subjective way of saying I can have AI sift through and do the brute force work that takes a whole lot of time. And then I can focus on the unique threats. Fair enough.
Oh, most definitely. I don't know if you know this about me, James, but before I started Dion training, I worked for the military for 20 years and I worked with US Navy. And when I was doing those things, we used a lot of, at the time, machine learning and some basic AI to do this type of threat hunting, right? One of the biggest things that we do is triage, right? If I'm looking at the amount of data that the NSA is looking at on a daily basis, it's millions upon millions of data points. I don't
Sure.
have enough people to do that, right?
That's
There's
right.
no way to do it. So you have to classify it. And so we had some very basic ML systems when I first started there back in 2012. And these machine learning systems go, okay, this is known bad, block it. This is known good, allow it. These we're not so sure on, send it to a triage analyst. And then it went through a tier 1 guy or gal. And if they didn't know what it was, it went to a tier 2. And if they didn't, it went to a tier 3. And we had like 2 malware analysts at any given time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Those two were very high capacity people making lots of money, and AI couldn't take their place, and machine learning couldn't take their place. But by the time it got to them, it already went through 5 people, and it may have been 24 hours as elapsed, right? With
That's right.
AI, a lot of those lower level triage positions are going to be done by AI. And so now we can get it to that higher level person much quicker. The other thing I've used it for in my training and things like that is if I'm looking at packet captures and I find some piece of malware in the wild, I can actually feed that into AI and say, hey, I found this code. What does this do? And it will say, oh, based on this line, I think it's doing this and thinking this. And it can at least key me in of where I should pay attention to. Because if I look at a binary that's a meg long, that megabyte file may have, I don't know, 500,000 lines of code in it. It would take me forever to go through all that, especially if it's written in assembly, right? But by using AI, and especially tuned AI that knows about malware and how these things operate, it can start breaking those things down. So when I think of defensive operations, I think that's going to be one of the areas. I think another thing is we're going to create agents that are going to be looking across the systems in real time at what threats are and then determining what we should allow and what we shouldn't. Microsoft, you mentioned spam before. They have a really great anti-malware tool that uses a sandboxing technology that when your emails are coming to your domain, if you're on Office 365, it will take those attachments, open them in the sandbox, and see if they're malicious. Because some things, they don't look malicious when they're static, but once you start running them, you find they're malicious, right?
Suddenly they change. And
Yep.
so I think that threat emulation and the simulation of live events, when I say live events, in other words, Jason actually interacting with that business email compromise or James interacting with Slack or whatever. I think it's the threat modeling there and those situations. And also you do need people to go in and to train and say, here is that bit of code found in a packet capture or some sort of binary, looking in the ELF stuff and finding out what those strings are. And then you can put that in and AI can take that and run with it. But it will constantly need training and retraining. I think it's one of the things that's really important.
I will tell you personally, I am not comfortable yet letting AI run wild and
No,
just turning on an AI system and saying, go ahead and protect my network. Because AI doesn't always take into account the business side of things too. And I have this problem with a lot of my junior analysts when I worked at some of these large organizations. Oh no, the XYZ country is attacking us. We should block it right now. We're like, whoa, don't do that. We
yeah,
want them to attack us because we want to see what they're doing. We want to figure out their techniques so we can reverse engineer them and then use it against them. And
I like
so you
I
don't
like
always want to block.
yeah, I like it what you're talking about because I liken that to the kind of the antivirus kind of thing. It's you have to get at each other in order to a body has to do that in order to create the antibodies to I don't know if you know what I'm talking about with
Oh
that
yeah.
analogy. And it's the same way in gathering data. And it's really cybersecurity is increasingly about grabbing good data sets, normalizing them, figuring it out, and then taking action and turning that into actionable information. So yeah, it's really very much about data capturing.
I think the other side of this, we talked a lot about defense, but there's also offensive. And as defenders, we have to think about how are the bad guys or bad gals out there or bad people using AI against us, right? What are some ways that you're seeing AI used? And I'll give you a couple that I see.
Sure. One of the first things is that social engineering is very important. It's probably the primary way in which organizations get breached, et cetera. We know this coming up with better pretexts. And
Oh yeah.
so I work for the research department, and we don't research how to hack into people, but research is extremely important. And again, ChatGPT can do some very interesting things to create very natural pretexts, not only to help you with the research directionally, but also in shaping the wording so that it tricks James. And I've noticed, haven't you noticed, the hacks, the pretexts for social engineering have gotten better. And I think part of that is because of things like the ability to use Gen A. And that's one thing I think.
Oh yeah, that was the first one I was thinking of as well. And I see this a lot where in the old days we had some really well-written phishing campaigns, and then we had some really crappy ones. And even today, I still see some really crappy ones and ones that we all know are scams, right? The classic Nigerian prince, right? For example, and I've got $100 million in oil revenues that I need to get to the US, and just give me your bank account and I'll take care of it for you. And I still see some of those go out. And I've had students ask me, why do we still see the crappy ones when there's things like Gen AI? And what I
Fine.
always tell them is this is actually being done on purpose by the scammers. And it is because if they are actually too good, they get too many leads coming back and they don't have enough people to source them all. So what they're doing is they're using bad grammar, bad spelling, bad premises, because if you do respond to that, you're really a gullible person and they know you're on the hook and they're going to go after you. The other thing I see with AI is
That's a
if
race
you
to the
set up
bottom, right? That's the race
oh,
to the bottom model. Yeah.
oh
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And like you said, as you're getting these better social engineering campaigns, the other thing AI can be done is they can create custom chatbots and custom GPTs that can answer those and keep that person on. Because again, we talked about the Turing test. It's the same thing. Like some of these love scams, people talk for months and not realize they're talking to a computer, not an actual person, and they're getting scammed out of money because they've trained these things. So that's another offensive thing that the general public is facing, right? When we look at it for corporate, one of the things we're seeing with offensive operations is if we're using malware and antivirus, most of those are signature based. When you're using AI, you can scramble the signature on the fly instantly, and you can write malicious code instantly using
That's
these things.
on the offensive side. I think what you're seeing is a lot of, you can call it modeling, you can call it prediction, but the idea of saying, okay, this was an effective technique in the past, it's been captured. How can we morph this?
Yep.
Years ago, there were polymorphic viruses people worried about. Now imagine AI being able to assist in the, how should I say it, the modification of known attacks. And
Oh,
that's
yeah.
pretty interesting. And I think you're going to see a lot more of that. And in fact, it's already with us. A lot of these outfits, I'll call them outfits, gangs, you call them what you wish, have those resources available to them every day. When I say
Oh,
those
yeah.
resources, the ability to use AI to make changes heuristically, in other words, step by step. How can I get this just a little bit different? In the old days, what you did, and I suddenly forget the resource. What's the resource where you can go up and if you have bad code, you can upload it and it will
Oh, yeah. Virus total.
virus total.
Yep.
So,
And it checks like 45 different databases to see if it's known or not. Yep.
so, and that's meant as legitimately, hey, do I have a problem? Of course, attackers will use that and go, they'll upload it until virus total goes, yeah, I never seen that before. Ah, we're there. So AI can automate that.